last video, Pansy gave a succinct summary of the utopian claims that have been made about how the internet was going to fundamentally disrupt economics and create freedom and wonder for all in a final triumph over government and corporate tyranny. These claims captured a great deal of the popular imagination surrounding the internet and what it could and should be. And they still live on today, despite all of the facts about what actually happened. This isn't to say that what happened to the internet was an inevitability. The internet definitely began as a space that was not completely dominated by commercial interests and which was actively hostile to them. A series of events caused by people and exacerbated by people across decades meant that the internet became an attractive prospect for investment. Once a series of boom and bust cycles had completed, internet companies had to find some ways of becoming profitable in ways that didn't involve burning venture capital money. Their eventual solution was to monetize previously free resources that were available to them. In this case, the most important resource was data. Canadian digital economies theorist Nick Cernick distinguishes data from knowledge. Data is information that something happened, while knowledge is information about why something happened. Data might contain knowledge, but doesn't have to. Internet companies were well positioned to start treating data as a raw material produced by the activities of internet users, which could then be refined and processed for a wide variety of purposes, including being sold to advertisers. A platform is a business model that's optimized for gathering data and then monetizing it. Cernick describes platforms as being digital infrastructures that create a space in which different groups can interact, and which can then record data of all of the activities which happen inside the space that they control. Often platforms provide tools to make them attractive to different sets of users, but the point is to become the intermediary who can then record everything passing through. Google is a platform for searching, connecting users looking for information with people who want to provide it for them, and gathering vast amounts of activity on search information which can be on-sold as well. Facebook is a platform for social interaction. It harvests every interaction and connection made using its services right down to every written but unsent message or post anyone has ever made and then thought better about. Uber connects drivers with passengers, harvesting information about who goes where when, both for drivers and for passengers. All platforms produce what Cernick calls network effects, where the more people who use a platform, the more useful that platform becomes to other people. This produces a snowball effect that can be difficult to escape and difficult to compete with. Who hates Facebook and Twitter, but would lose access to your whole social group or social groups if you weren't on them because they won't move? Exactly. Along with being an attractive reason to join, losing the benefits of the platform becomes an incentive not to leave either. Communication studies theorist Tarleton Gillespie argues that the idea of the platform is part of a very careful dance tied to how internet companies try to pitch themselves to different audiences that have often conflicting needs and conflicting interests. In The Politics of Platforms, Gillespie argues that platform suggests, quote, a comforting sense of technical neutrality and progressive openness, while meaning very little in the way of specifics. Users believe it's a platform for them to work. For advertisers, it's their platform to profit from, etc. Meanwhile, companies like Facebook can claim to be a publisher when it would get them the American First Amendment protections of a publisher, and claim not to be a publisher to avoid the responsibilities tied to being one. This pattern has repeated in many contexts, such as whether a given platform counts as a service provider or not. Cernic identifies 5 different kinds of platforms, and an individual company might bridge multiple types as part of its operation. Advertising platforms like Google and Facebook extract information on users and process it in order to sell ad space. Cloud platforms like AWS, Salesforce, Dropbox, and others own the hardware and software of digitally dependent businesses for rental. Industrial platforms like Siemens and GM transform traditional manufacturing into services, lowering their own costs of production in the process. Product platforms turn a traditional good into a service and then collect rent on them. Spotify does this for music, and Rolls-Royce did this hilariously for plane engines. They stopped selling engines and started renting them to airlines per hour of actual use, meanwhile harvesting information about how they were used, which meant that they could redesign the engines, dropping their prices, and meaning that it's difficult to compete with them unless you're in a position to give away a whole load of pre-built, pre-tested plane engines for effectively free as you get started. Lastly, lean platforms are companies like Uber or Airbnb, which own no assets, reducing costs as much as possible. Amazon is an example of a company which has divisions covering all of these categories. The whole concept of platform capitalism critiques elements from both of the models presented by Pansy in the previous videos. Far from breaking up corporate monopolies, the internet has become a force multiplier for companies to extend themselves globally and monetize the activities of their users. At the same time, the audience have become large-scale producers of media, creating a diversity of content in a context where corporations profit from it all. In the next video, Pansy will explore other direct critiques of the political economy model of understanding the media, covered in the first video for the week.